think our bodies are pretty much what they are, but thinking as a science fiction writer now, the human body itself may change in the future. We may become more integrated to our machines. Right now, we're very closely interactive with our machines, but they're not, aside from artificial hearts and various implants and things like that. We haven't started to replace ourselves, but that could happen. And that's actually a theme of the movie that you mentioned, which is Battle Angel Alita.
But I'm sorry, I mean like the concept of the body.
You're talking about body image? Like in fashion?
No.
About the way people will have a kind of dual life. There'll be the life in their actual body and the life in their avatar body, whatever that means, whatever role they choose to play. Well, and I think that's going to continue to be the case, and I think that our virtual lives are going to become more important. The irony, of course, is that Avatar was done using virtual production, but it was about, I think, something that we need to do, which is to reconnect ourselves to the real world, what I call actual reality. And I think that as our tendency, as we move into what I call the post-human age, toward the end of this century, our tendency is going to be to live more and more in virtual space. We're going to have to force ourselves to remain connected to our natural organic bodies and to the natural organic systems that allow us to survive. We're not that smart yet. We can't replace nature. It's been tried. People tried to live inside a closed loop ecosystem that they built themselves, and they spent $20 million or $100 million on the Biosphere 2 project. They failed. Even with good scientists, we can't do it. We can't replace what nature does for us. So we're not ready to make the leap from our organic bodies into completely virtual existence. So I think we have to balance this. Certainly it's a lot of fun to be in Second Life or gaming or RPGs or whatever and have this. It's great for the imagination. We all have great imaginations. I think that's great, but it has to be balanced. It can't be one, and it can't be the other either. We can't all go live in the forest either. First of all, there's not that much forest left. Secondly, we wouldn't know how to do it. But we have to have a respect for the natural processes, and we have to feed our souls with staying connected to nature and the real world. Yeah, I think these are themes. Certainly, I strongly disagreed with the U.S. going into Iraq, personally. To me, it was a naked act of imperial aggression. I'd say that in the United States as well as I'd say it here. And again, it goes back to that whole thing I was talking about in my remarks about energy and the fact that we don't have an energy policy, and we need to change, we need to reassess our values. But for everybody to point the finger at the U.S. is a little simplistic, because we collectively, as quote-unquote Western civilization, have been doing this for a long time. We have a long and grand and glorious history of getting into ships, going to other people's land, and taking them from them. And usually either killing them off or enslaving them in the process. And that's all over the world, and that's every European nation. It's just sort of the way business has been done. And I think, as a science fiction writer, you say, well, when we go to another planet, what are we going to do? Pretty much the same thing we've always done.
Actually trying to raise that kind of consciousness, not only in the U.S. but in general, within the country.
Absolutely, I think people in other countries outside the U.S. tend to look at it as more the kind of the colonial period in general, in the way that it affected South Central and North America and Africa and Australia, New Zealand, Indonesia, and so on. People in the United States tended to think that they were being singled out and attacked. But on the other hand, I was pretty upset about what happened with the Iraq War, and if people want to relate it to that, that is there for a reason. That's why one of the characters talks about shock and awe. And by the way, the reference to September 11th is a little bit, it's not in the script per se, but as we created the images, we started to realize, wow, it sure looks, certainly there have been a lot of big apocalyptic events throughout time, whether it was the eruption of Mount Vesuvius or whatever, and they all kind of look like that. And September 11th looked like that, and it's embedded in our consciousness, our global consciousness. But yeah, I mean, as we did it, we thought, wow, I called it the Navi 9/11. I said, all right, that's okay. We all remember how horrified we were, how attacked we felt. All right, so what are we saying with the movie? Nature, if nature could speak, nature would say, I feel that way. I feel attacked. I feel destroyed. It's not right. It's not just. You see what I mean? That's what the movie's trying to say. It's not really specifically a comment on 9/11 as much as it is using that kind of subconscious Rorschach reaction to the image to create an emotional state. If you see what I mean? Oh, it's just something that I've always studied. There's a written history by a guy named Bernal Diaz that was written in I think 1515 or something like that, which is his story as a foot soldier in Cortez's army coming into Mexico, basically one of the first major landings by the Spanish. It's just an amazing point in history. I just mentioned it as an aside, just because I love history, and there are certain moments in history that I think are defining in the collision of those two worlds. I just think it's interesting. I don't have any plans to do it right away, but I might do it. Because there are certain milestones of CG development that were created in my film. So like, what will the next one be? I don't know. I can't tell you. When we started down the path of doing Avatar, we knew that there were certain problems we needed to solve. We needed to solve real emotional faces in CG characters. We needed to solve water interacting with people. We needed to solve all kinds of problems in terms of lighting, how to create a forest. Everybody talks about the people in Avatar, but the entire world was synthetic. The entire forest. There was no real rainforest. We only had one day of exterior shooting on the whole movie, and it was the landing of the helicopter because we couldn't get the helicopter to fit on the stage. And even then, we put it in a CG forest. So I can't tell you. Every film, the way it works for me is I don't set out to solve problems and then write the story to fit that. I write a story that's highly imaginative, and then as we read it, we say, okay, we're going to solve that, that, and that, and then we go out to solve it. So it'll really be determined by the story. Well, I'm not 100% sure I understand the question, even translated. But for me, there's the technology that's used to make the film. And then there is a comment on technology and our human relationship with technology that's made within the film as the content of the film. And Avatar is a little bit of a paradox in a way, because it used the most advanced technology in order to create something that was, a piece of art that was extolling the virtues of the natural world, in which technology was really the enemy. I don't have a problem with that. To me, there's an uncoupling of the way a movie's made and what a movie's about. You could do a movie, let's just take a movie at random, Last of the Mohicans, a movie that was made about North American Indians, 300 years ago. There's no technology in that movie. But it takes technology to make a movie. So there were trucks and there were dollies and steady cams and lights and all that, computerized post-production and all that. So it's no different. So the subject of the movie and the technology behind the lens that's used to create it and bring it to you, in the case of the new technology of the 3D projectors and so on, to me those are two separate subjects. Now, having said that, most of my movies comment on our human relationship with technology. Usually negatively, but not always. Because, I was talking about all the bad things, in my remarks today, to the young audience, about all the bad things that our civilized world has created, and these are problems we have to solve. But how are we going to solve them? We're going to do biofuels and concentrated solar thermal and solar photovoltaic and geothermal and wind power. These are all things that, and we're going to have a smart grid and higher efficiency, energy efficiency and so on. These are all technological solutions. So we're going to think our way out of the problems that our technology makes, because we're smart and that's what we do.